Hi everyone, and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about technical mentoring. You know, learning from other people and taking the time to help other people learn is such an important thing to do, and we're going to talk about it in more detail. Now, our guest today is a technical powerhouse, author of many technical books, has worked at loads of tech companies, and spent a lot of time and energy over the years being a tech mentor. So please, could you welcome to the podcast, Jeff Stokes. Jeff, it's lovely to have you with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You are welcome. The pleasure is all ours. Now, Jeff, for people that haven't met you before, could you introduce yourself? What's your background?
Yeah, sure. I kind of stumbled into IT back in like 1994, 95, back when things were pretty young in IT operations. I worked at DEC as a help desk engineer and then worked my way up to system administration. Worked mainly on the operations side for a good number of years. Ran my own consulting company for a bit, and then had kids, and in the States, no insurance, so needed to get a day job. Yeah, I got into financial technology, fintech, and then hopped over to Microsoft and worked there for, I don't know, about 6, 7 years, and then did a little brief stint away, came back, worked in Azure for a little bit, and then I'm at Tanium now for the last 7 years. It'll be 7 years in May. I do debugging and performance analytics and a lot of other things here, but those are kind of my main bread and butter.
Right, so you've worked at a huge variety of tech companies there, and in full clarity for everybody, that was where we first crossed paths, wasn't it? At
Hmm.
Microsoft,
Yeah.
we were both in the field engineering department at the time, so
Yep.
working with customers. But you've worked at such a variety of interesting companies. But as well as working at those companies, I understand that you're a prolific author, shall we say?
Yeah. I've written. I've kind of. Yeah. I like doing collaborative projects. Even if it's something other than public speaking. Just a firm believer in kind of giving other people opportunities too. So I've written 3 books where I was like the primary kind of organizer. And one of the authors out of a couple, and then I contributed to several more books through the years, some of it Microsoft Press, some of them for other publishers, things like that. But yeah, I wrote a book on MDT, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, and Windows 10 Enterprise Administration and Windows 11 Enterprise Administration. Yeah.
Brilliant. And as well as author, and for those that are watching on video, you've got a virtual background on full of speaker lanyards. So
Yeah.
you are a speaker as well at events. What sort of events is it that you've spoken at, Jeff?
Yeah, so I actually got my start in public speaking in PFE, field engineering at Microsoft, where I took the role without really doing a lot of research and found out that a lot of it was training customers. So I kind of liked it. I enjoyed giving back and helping people sort of learn something new. And my first public speaking event was at Tech Ready, like I think Tech Ready 10 or 11, something like that, way back when, which is an internal Microsoft conference, kind of like Tech Ed was, but internal. And then, spoke at a number of those through my years at Microsoft, and then did Tech Eds as well, and then some independent events, Tech Mentor, Angel Beat. I can't remember all of them at this point. And then user group conferences too. I would come and speak at those, which are definitely a smaller venue, but still a lot of fun. And you get a lot more engagement the smaller the audience is in a way.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so, I guess as I sort of summarise on your career, really deeply technical roles, and always giving back, whether that be writing books, whether that be speaking at events, and trying to help people develop their skills, which points us really nicely, I think, to the topic of today, really, which is tech mentoring. So I guess the first question I'd love to ask is, from your perspective, what is tech mentoring?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I look at mentoring someone in the technology field, I think uh, a lot of it centers around kind of giving, making sure you're giving the time to someone, but also you're kind of providing them a path, that maybe worked for you, or that you can see for them, where you engage with this person on a regular basis, you get to know them, develop a relationship with them, and certainly that's part of it. But also it's kind of figuring out, technology is such a broad field, and it's like what are they good at? What are they naturally interested in? What will they succeed in? Kind of helping them figure that out, and then figuring out, the roadmap of here's where they are, here's where they want to be. How do you sort of traverse that path, that landscape? So a lot of them are lengthy engagements, if you will. But it's really rewarding. I really enjoy it. It's really cool to see someone succeed.
And so, really, tech mentoring, from what you're saying there, is sort of helping put together that customized technical development plan, and some advice and guidance and a bit of nurturing and answering questions, and things like that help people from where they are to where they want to be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes you run into someone where they say, "This is what I want to do," and you take a look at it, and it's like, well, I kind of know what that's like. Are you sure that's what you want? And then you kind of explain it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, that would have been a landmine." And so, a lot of it is just providing guidance, and then being a sounding board too.
Yeah, because it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, people say tech, but tech is such a broad topic, isn't it? There's so many technologies out there. You've got infrastructure, you've got networking, you've got software development, you've got data, you've got AI, app dev. There's so much
Yeah,
breadth in there. So trying to give some focus and some clarity on how people build that technical muscle that they've got.
yeah, sure, absolutely.
And so, um, I guess it would be interesting to just think about why tech mentoring, and I guess to look at it from two perspectives. Like, why is tech mentoring good for you as a mentor? So what do you get out of it? And then I guess it'd be good to look at it from what are the benefits of tech mentoring to a mentee. So, as a mentor, what are the things that you get out of it?
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, you're given a chance, an opportunity in the mentorship relationship to, kind of give back, but really you gain something out of this too. I always go back to the corny 1980s kung fu shows where, the teacher or the master learns something from the student. And after having kids, it's almost like parenting, where you learn as a parent, as well as teaching the child. There's also things that you learn along the way. And I've learned a lot about myself and the tech industry, different areas of tech that I wouldn't necessarily have probed and looked into. I've done so, because I wanted to understand it better for, mentorship purposes. So definitely career growth, networking, and just giving back, and, yeah, I guess it's about it. Yeah.
And what about from the mentee perspective?
Oh, yeah, sure. So from the mentee perspective, you're getting access to someone that, has gobs of experience, has maybe done the role that you are interested in, and just has that perspective and knowledge that they're willing to share. And I think that's really the primary thing. You can look at it in terms of deliverable goals, a better job, changing career focus, finding something that you like more, that is still going to be able to pay the bills, things like that. And then in addition, networking and having a relationship with someone that, kind of, it's almost like a private counselor, like a mental thing, where you have someone that you can go to and, sort of talk. It's like a safe space, if you will, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've sort of, as you've been talking there, just starting to reminisce through my career really, and if I think, particularly when I was in my earlier career, I think of some of the technical mentors that I had that were just fantastic, and what I think I got from it was, firstly, uh, it reduced the overwhelm. There was so much to learn, to saying, right, just do these things next, learn these things next. And so
Yeah.
reducing that overwhelm and giving me some real clarity on the direction that I was heading. It was somebody to ask those questions that are hard to type as a Google question. Do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes
Yeah.
you're like, I don't know how to word this to not get a million hits or 0 hits. I don't know how
Right.
to ask the question properly. And but having a real person that you could talk to that would understand the nuance, I guess, of what you were trying to do. I always found that was really useful. So sort of having that direction, asking those difficult questions, and then a human that could ask me difficult questions, or set me little challenges and set me labs or hands-on things to do, to try and
Yeah.
stretch me. I loved all of that kind of stuff when I was earlier in career.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, the only thing I look back on is that I think when I was younger in my career, I didn't listen enough. I look back on it in regret sometimes, not, just, retrospect, the hindsight's 2020 and all that. But yeah, you have people that are in your career that, you can definitely suss out not just the question you're asking, but really the intent, what is it you really are trying to find out? And you're right. Some of those questions are really hard to just do a Google or a Chat GPT with, and get good information, good quality information. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then if I sort of think to when I was again still in deep technical roles that was perhaps a little bit more seasoned now, and was more in more tech and mentor roles, and I think about the things that I loved getting from doing it. Um, Firstly was tremendous energy. So when often a lot of the mentees are so keen and eager to learn, and I remember getting energized by getting to that, because sometimes you end up in lots of meetings with cynical folks talking about things where change will never happen. Do you know what I mean? And it can all get intense. And then suddenly you'd be right. Well, now I'm going to go and talk to some people that are eager to learn and are genuinely fascinated by what's going on. And it was just
sure.
such an energizing experience.
It's very invigorating. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So let's talk through maybe what are it, so let's look at it from a mentor perspective.
sure.
What tips have you got? So if we've got some people, well, I know we've got lots of people that listen to this that are very seasoned professionals with some great experience to show. Maybe are interested in being a mentor, maybe they're doing it already.
Yeah.
What tips would you share on how to be a great tech mentor for people?
Um, I think one of the primary things is really listening. And then one of the pitfalls that I've hit that I've sort of padded or adjusted my game around is that times are different. I had someone come to me and ask, what what are you you know what how do I get to where you are? And it's like, well, my path isn't necessarily the path that's going to work for you. Let's find out what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your interests are, right? And then where that maps into the technology landscape, and then how do we kind of move forward, right? Um, but I think some of the primary things are really soft skills based. If you're a seasoned person in IT or technology, you've got the technical chops. It's more about learning how to train how to explain things well. And I learned some of this when writing that, when you're writing a book about something, you can't engage with the audience. So you have to learn to kind of adjust your brain to what does the person reading this book need to know that they don't already know that I know, right?
Okay.
And so it's an interesting mental exercise to go through that and kind of get that perspective of where's this person, the reader or the mentee, coming from, and then how do I adapt my delivery or make sure they're getting the nuggets of information that are consumable. So to make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. So the first thing you were saying there was you got to really listen
Yeah,
to where they are and where they want to go. So you don't just jump straight, like, oh, I'm your tech mentor for Azure. Right, here's your
sure.
plan.
Right.
But you're stepping back and you're spending some time to understand where they are, and understanding what their passion is and understand where they want to go.
Yeah, and where they say they want to go may not actually be where they want to be. It may turn out to be something else along the way. I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, my career, if you look at it, it's like a maze almost. I did help desk, server administration. I've done Exchange backend support, architecture, storage architecture. I was a network admin for a while. It was an interesting path. Where I learned a lot of things about a lot of different technologies. But that's not always the best way to go about learning something, particularly if you have time constraints or you have specific goals in mind. But yeah, being able to listen to the mentee, and really understand what it is that they're trying to achieve, so you can kind of figure out what is the best thing for them, and it may not be what they think it is. Like I had someone say, "Oh, I want to get into cybersecurity," and then when we started going through, it's like, okay, well, you have the hackers, you have this, you have that, white hat, you've got red team, and you got compliance reporting and this, and they're like, none of this sounds interesting to me. Or someone that says, well, I want to get in, I want to learn how to be a dev. And it's like, okay, well, then you start walking through what does that look like? And they're like, that sounds boring. And it's like, well, it's not for everybody. But, you go into this, particularly when mentees don't have a lot of experience in industry, they have been told this is what's good or this is what pays well, and it may not really play to what they're interested in or what they're naturally good at, you
Yeah,
know? So a lot of it's
yeah,
listening, I think, and it's not like you're dictating to them, hey, this is what you need to do, but it's more about making suggestions, and it's kind of like being a parent where it's like you can guide and lead, but you can't force someone to learn something a certain way or learn something. There has to be that desire and you know need and want for it to really connect.
Now, the other thing you said that was quite interesting just a second ago was it's not your job is not to get everything out of your brain and into their brain. And this was going back to when you were talking about your authoring. Your job is to work out what they need to know and then give
Yeah,
them a path on how they get to know it.
yeah,
Which is different, isn't it? It's not just you being giving a stream of this is what I learned in this role, this is what I learned in this role. It's saying very specifically these are the things you need to know, and
right,
this is a way of learning these things.
absolutely, yeah.
And when you're mentoring, how do you determine what sort of stuff do you want to teach them personally? What sort of stuff do you want them to go and learn for themselves? What sort of how much do you give them resources or certification plans that they might want to how do you build that out and work out, I guess, the details of how you're going to help them like that?
Yeah. So when I approach it, like we'll take someone I worked with. He's an engineer at Microsoft now, and he started off contacted me on LinkedIn through LinkedIn. He was IT guy for a police department in the state I live in,
Okay.
and he's like, hey, I want to get into technology. I'd like to work at Microsoft someday. How do I do it? And for that. At the time, I was doing a lot of MDT stuff. I was kicking around the idea of writing the book on MDT, and a lot of people are having to upgrade off XP. And so, well, one of the surefire ways to find some need is to get into deployment if that's interesting to you. And he'd already been doing some deployment, so it was kind of a natural niche for him anyway. But it was, okay, here's where you are. No one's going to hire you right now where you're at, but here's how you get to where you're ready to jump into like a consultancy role, and then you can learn. There's nothing beats being in a consultancy role or a PFE role where you're in different environments a lot, because you see a myriad of ways technology is used across the world, or just the environment in general. People, you could say, yeah, it's a Windows box, but is it driving X-ray machine, missile defense system, a stock trader's box? I mean, all these things have different sort of requirements and needs and acceptable use cases and all that. And I think that giving them sort of a path of here's the nuggets you can learn, and here's where you hop jobs to do this. And I focus on deployment because it was natural. But yeah, so we went through, and he worked as a consultant for a year or two, and then ended up getting into PFE, and the rest is history. But yeah, it's providing those sort of nuggets of knowledge, like you said, and then giving them some real guidance on when does the job become a detriment to you that you need to move on. I don't like job hopping, recommending it as a natural thing, but sometimes you have to. Sometimes you outgrow a role, and you have to look at what's next.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah,
interestingly, that story that you were just talking about there, um, so this wasn't an internal mentoring. This wasn't just mentoring somebody that was perhaps in your team or mentoring somebody in your organization. This is somebody that reached out to you from LinkedIn.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And yet you still took the time and energy to respond to that person and to mentor that person.
sure. He wanted to learn, so yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, isn't it? That's awesome. And it's
But
interesting when I was at Microsoft, part of the objectives, the commitments,
mm,
that each employee had, part of that was around mentoring and community contribution. So we would think about that in, when we were thinking about the performance review of individuals. That was one of the aspects that we wanted to consider is how much time had they and what their impact had they had, mentoring and building other people up and contributing to the community. So it was a great way
yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, back then they even had the mentors at Microsoft program where when I first started there as a call center engineer working on Exchange, I joined it just to learn a little bit about programming. And they assigned me a mentor, and I learned some C, and learned the development wasn't really for me, which is fine. But yeah, they had that program where you could just go in and say, "Hey, I want to be mentored on this. Here's what I'm looking for. Here's when my times are available." And it was like a site that would link you up with people that were available, which I thought was really valuable. Particularly in a company as big as Microsoft, uh, it's hard to network, particularly as a new individual. So yeah,
So Jeff, when you're mentoring somebody, how much time do you spend every week, like when you're mentoring somebody?
yeah, it depends on what the person's interested in, how closely it aligns with what the depth skills that you have are, I think. But I mean, like I'm mentoring someone right now in data science, and I talk to her. I mean, it's at least weekly, and even it's just to check in to see how things are going, what's going on. But yeah, it really varies, the time commitment, and of course it fluctuates too. I have less time in the summer. My kids were out of school, stuff like that. So you can't sacrifice your other commitments over it or anything, but even just an hour or two a week is usually pretty easy to squeeze in and is worth a lot of time to the mentee, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's flip it round to the mentee. So from your experience, Jeff, so for people listening to the podcast, that would like to find a tech mentor and would like somebody to help them, what tips would you have for those people that want to be a mentee, um, in terms of how to be a great mentee?
Yeah. Um, first it comes with communication to, when you're reaching out to someone, particularly if it's like a blind request, where you don't have any context to start from. That's usually a difficult conversation. Um, but I mean, there's organizations where you can go and find a mentor. That's how I found the current one I'm working with, was through an organization. I think they're defunct now. It's called Next Billion. But one of the other things is making sure that you can commit the time and energy to implementing the things that someone's going to convey to you.
Okay.
And I've tried mentoring several people where, it's like you check in with them after 3 or 4 weeks, and it's like, hey, did you get your lab set up or this or that? No, been watching Game of Thrones. I mean, it's like, okay. I mean, that's cool, whatever. But it's like, you feel like you're kind of spinning wheels at that point as a mentor when you're working with a mentee that just maybe isn't focused enough on it to, doesn't maybe, I don't want to say don't want it enough, but aren't kind of mentally organized enough to sort of absorb what you're trying to give to them and put it into practice. So I'd
Yeah.
say from a mentee perspective is making sure you can kind of, you know, do the deliverables, make it happen.
Yeah. So ring fence some time, um,
Yeah,
and ring fence some time to not only speak to the mentee, but then to do all of the things. Because you're not going to be an expert at anything by having an hour a week on the phone with Jeff. It's all
right.
of the other stuff that you do, and you need to ring fence and protect the time to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess ring fencing time, ring fencing a bit of commitment and energy. Anything else that you'd like to see, or any advice you give to mentees?
I mean, some ambition and drive is really it, and that's sort of an intangible. Being a self starter is also real big. I mean, a lot of the programs that like I would send someone through aren't necessarily like instructor led courses. They might be go at your own pace. Because that's the kind of thing when you're working a full time job you need. Typically, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to go take a course at this class, and work be damned. But yeah, from a mentee's perspective, I think having the drive, ambition, energy, and being somewhat of a self-starter, self-learner, having some ability to do that, not be kind of spoon-fed. That's definitely not the mentor's job to deliver things to that degree. There's it's more of like a guide than or a Sherpa or what have you, than a full-on parent. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, really interesting. So, you mentioned there that you'd been matched with one of your mentees through a now defunct organisation.
Yeah.
If you are either a mentor or a mentee that wants to find either a mentor or a mentee, depending on
Sure.
your perspective, um, how do you find one? What approaches work, or do you know of any places that are not defunct where you can find them now?
I don't know of any right now, but I imagine searching for it would find a number of them. The trick's going to be finding them that aren't scams and, trying to take advantage of you, I guess. Another way to do it where there's more of a human interaction, I think Microsoft still does the user group conferences and things like that.
Yeah,
And that's a great way to kind of network with your industry, uh, and, maybe find someone through that venue. I know that like at Tech Ready, the first Tech Ready I did, they had a class. It was the first one I took, the first session, and it was on learning how to network at Microsoft. As far as building up a social network to get things done cross org and all that.
yeah,
And it was from a group called Birds of a Feather. And most conferences will have sort of a soft skills, networking, mentoring, sort of social aspect to it. And I think that's worth a lot. Because then if you go there, you're going to find people that have somewhat of a similar interest. They're at the same conference, so it's kind of maps already. And then
yeah.
it's just a matter of meeting and discussing and making sure it's a good fit and everything. But yeah, I've used services in the past, and I don't think they charge anything. The one I used was a nonprofit.
Okay.
I'd be really leery of engaging with somewhere where they're like, okay, you need to pony up some cash, or give us your social security number and your bank account info, stuff like that. I would stay away from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
I've been hearing a lot
So
of horror stories from people dealing with recruiters that, empty your bank account and things like that. So yeah,
oh dear. So I guess like internal. So if you're a big company, there's quite often if you look there might be an official mentor program. I've certainly come across those as well.
yeah, or
So
or there should be anyway. Maybe that's something you can suggest to your HR.
yeah, yeah. Or then conferences we're saying often have that sort of function that gets set up. Um,
Yep.
user groups really good. I mean, I go to lots of user groups, and the great thing about user groups is um, they tend to be evenings or weekends. Now, why do I say that's great? Is it tends to be therefore that the people are there are quite passionate about the thing that they're there to be, that
Yeah.
they're there to talk about, and if they're passionate about that thing, they're more likely um, to want to give back to the community because they're part of the community and they're giving back to the community.
Yeah.
So internal mentoring schemes, conference mentoring schemes, user groups. The other thing, and I think you said this about how the guy that you mentored reached out to you, was he just approached you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And you said yes, and that is something that I've definitely learned since I started my own business is um, ask what's the worst that could happen and be bold and
Yeah.
courageous. The worst you can get is, well, no, I haven't got time or I don't want to.
Yeah.
But sometimes people like yourself say yes, and then
Oh
all of a
yeah.
sudden you've got a
Yeah.
great you know you're going to get a million mentor requests now, Jeff, don't you?
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking that's going to happen. But
Oh,
you're right. It does. It takes some initiative, I guess. Even if you're at a user group, you still got to go up and talk to the person. But yeah, user groups I think are kind of underrated, and are really a good resource. And like I don't know what they use now, Eventbrite or Meetup or whatever the site is that people use, but yeah, finding local user groups I think is pretty valuable.
yeah. Well, do you know what, Jeff? I have just glanced at the clock, and do you know what? We are at the end of the episode. Can you believe it? It is flown by. Um, I wonder, could you perhaps just sort of, summarise for us what would be the key takeaways for people listening to the podcast?
Yeah, I think the key takeaways maybe mentorship is both being a mentee and a mentor is something that I've personally found valuable in my career, and I think a lot of other people would as well. If you have any interest in giving back to folks, I would encourage you to look at being a mentor for someone, and spending the time. It's really rewarding. It's interesting. You learn stuff about yourself and you learn about new technologies too, along the way. And then as a mentee, just be a self starter, stick to it, and don't be afraid to get a rejection. Always, if you're looking for someone, don't be afraid to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think, sort of from my perspective, what I really, as I've reflected on this, when you're a mentor, the amount of energy that you get from mentoring somebody and seeing that person develop, I think is brilliant, and so really rewarding to your point. So
Yeah.
I think that's good. And then if I think about it from a mentee perspective, I've had so many mentors in my career that have helped me in so many different ways, with particular technologies or particular tasks, or some even broader career type mentors.
Yeah.
And what I find really effective is those mentors that are a real expert in a field that I now need to understand, and to be able to have a relationship with them and talk to them and ask questions. For me, I found it as one of the most effective ways of learning something quite quickly is to get
Yeah.
humans involved, as well as video on demand, as well as books, as well as all of those other great things. But to be able to have a real human that you can talk to and ask questions to is such a powerful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is.
Love it, love it. Now, I guess just to finish off, where can people, if people do want to get in touch with you, ask you questions about how to be a mentor or a mentee, where can people get in touch with you in internet land, Jeff?
I've got a blog, but I think LinkedIn's probably the better way. Yeah, just reaching out on LinkedIn.
Right.
My
Okay.
DMs
So,
are open.
right, I shall pop in the show notes your LinkedIn. It's Jeff Stokes, and I'll also pop a link to your blog in there, and maybe should we pop some links to some of your books on Amazon?
I mean, we can. Yeah, that'd be cool. I also have I wrote there was a question a while back on Quora asking what's the best thing that ever happened to you for being nice, and my answer was the mentorship program I had at for that guy that was a police department IT guy, and
Yeah.
yeah, I can share that as well.
Brilliant, brilliant. So we shall pop all of those in the show notes so that
All
people
right.
can get into it in more detail. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I know you're a super busy chap, and it is so lovely to have you with us. So thank you so much for your time, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Brilliant. Bye bye.